bipartisan support these days, but a service-oriented population is one of those things where we see bipartisan support. And we can highlight efforts by every president, every administration, and every political party to support the work that everyday Americans do to further the common good. President Teddy Roosevelt founded the Conservation Corps. President Hoover promoted service to address poverty and other social conditions. National service programs helped lead our nation out of the Great Depression in the 1930s. President Kennedy founded the Peace Corps, and President Johnson the VISTA program. President George H.W. Bush created the Points of Light Foundation to encourage volunteerism. President Clinton founded the Corporation for National and Community Service, which runs the AmeriCorps and Senior Corps programs. And following 9/11, President George W. Bush called upon all Americans to devote 2 years or 4,000 hours to volunteer service during their lifetime. These are but a few examples. Yet never before has our country tried to blend together the concepts of military, national, and public service into a single effort. And that brings me to the Commission on National, Military, and Public Service. The commission was the idea of the late Senator John McCain, a Republican of Arizona, and Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island, a Democrat. Both agreed that there was a need for a bipartisan effort to increase participation in national, public, and military service among all Americans to strengthen American democracy. We are truly at a crossroads in our nation's history. Millions of American citizens volunteer and engage in service every day. Yet there is more we can do, more ways to participate, more ways to embed service in the very fabric of civic engagement. And that's what the Commission is here to do. We intend to listen to those who serve, to the public, to those who don't serve, to learn about the obstacles to service, and then to make recommendations to foster a greater ethos of service and strengthen American democracy. As the name suggests, the Commission will focus on 3 broad areas of service. The first is military service. About 2.3 million Americans currently serve in uniform, including 1.3 on active duty and about another million in the Guard and Reserve. Those numbers may sound large, but they represent less than 1% of the U.S. adult population. Add to this are approximately 22 million veterans, so taken together about 9% of the U.S. population over the age of 18 has at one point in time served in uniform. But there's a growing disconnect between the general public and our armed forces. For example, in 1995, 40% of people aged 16 to 24 had a parent who had served in the military. Fast forward to 2016, that is down to 15%. And over the last decade, the number of young Americans that are eligible to serve and considering military service has markedly decreased. In fact, you may have heard the numbers. It's about 27% of the male population aged 18 to 24 are even eligible to serve in the military. And when you add in the number that are even considering service, that percentage shrinks dramatically. The next is national service. Many Americans give back to their communities, and we've seen examples of that during our trip here in Los Angeles when yesterday we spent time with Homeboy Industries and the incredible work that they are doing to help those that are transitioning out of incarceration. They give back through volunteer and government-sponsored programs, nonprofit, faith-based organizations, foundations, and private companies. In fact, 63 million Americans volunteer each year, including thousands of Americans right here in California. Some of you may have heard about AmeriCorps or Senior Corps or the Peace Corps. We have representatives from the Peace Corps here today. These are programs run by the federal government, and nearly 60,000 Americans are participating in those programs as we speak. Last but certainly not least is public service. Service in federal, state, local, or tribal government or in elected office. Currently about 2 million Americans work in the federal government. This number has been relatively constant for the past 20 years, but the percentage of Americans who are working for the federal government has decreased dramatically since World War II, from 2.4% down to 0.65%. More concerning is that of the 2 million who work for the federal government, only about 6% of them are under the age of 30. Now, many people also serve in state and local government. In California, for example, over 245,000 individuals are employed by government agencies. So in the last few slides, I talked about the decreasing or relatively low numbers of Americans that serve. With a population of 325 million Americans, we can, I say we must, do better. A little more than a quarter of our population, 90 million, are 19 years of age or younger, the millennials and Generation Z. They represent a huge potential for the country if we can find ways to encourage a greater number of them to serve. Add to that the over 48 million Americans that are age 65 or older, comprising about 15% of the total population. That is a growing source of untapped potential, people with life experiences that can continue to serve past what is considered retirement age. And there is actually research that shows the health benefits of those who continue to serve in the senior years. So that brings me back to the Commission and what we're going to do over the next 2 years. The Commission is going to focus on two primary areas which were given to us as charges by Congress when we were created. The first is evaluation of the military selective service system, and if there is a continued need for the program in its current form, if any changes should be made, or if it should be disestablished. The selective service system is commonly referred to as the draft, but it's important to note that they are actually two very different and separate things. One is the registration of males between the ages of 18 and 25. So any male in here between that age is probably registered. The idea behind the registration is to provide a ready pool of individuals to be mobilized for a national emergency should the need arise. The other is the actual call-up, or the draft. And for a draft to occur, it would take a piece of legislation enacted by Congress, signed into law by the President. Keep in mind, we have not had a draft since 1973. So the question that we were given by Congress is whether or not the program that is meant to provide a ready pool of individuals in the case of a national emergency, but which hasn't been used for over 30 years, is still necessary. The other, and what I think is probably even more important task, is to look at ways to increase the likelihood or the propensity of individuals to want to serve in national or public service. We are particularly interested in understanding how Americans feel about service. We want to hear from people who serve and from people who don't serve, from people who want to serve but don't know or are unable to serve, and from those who don't want to serve. So we're looking at a broad spectrum of why people don't or do not serve. Now, the Commission is made up of 11 commissioners, chosen by leaders in Congress from both parties and from President Obama, who was president at the time the bill was enacted. We are committed to a bipartisan approach to answer the essential questions on service that the Commission must address. Joining me in the leadership of the Commission are Mark Gearing, former Director of the Peace Corps, who oversees our work on national and public service, and Deborah Wada, former Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs, who oversees our work on military service. Throughout 2018 and 2019, the Commission will be visiting locations across the nation for a series of events and public conversations, much like the one we're having here today. The goal of these visits, again, is to listen to the American public and to ignite a conversation and to build a national movement around service. This is a big task, as you can imagine, and we need your help. That's why we're here today. Los Angeles, you're our 9th visit. We started our national tour in late February of this year when we visited Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Since that time, we have visited Colorado, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Florida, Iowa, Illinois, Texas, and Tennessee, and that's just this year. Actually, tonight we're heading down to San Diego, where we'll have a series of similar meetings in the San Diego area. These trips allow our commissioners to hear from Americans representing the rich diversity of our country. As part of our work, the Commission will explore a series of key questions that are listed here that serve as a guide for our conversations. I'm not going to read through them, but I will put them back up as a guide when we move to the public comment, question, and answer phase. We are encouraging the public to submit comments, thoughts, and ideas on any aspect of the Commission's mission and to stay informed on the latest news from the Commission via our website, which is www.inspire2serve.gov, is listed on the banner at the front of the table. And at our social media channels, including Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, at Inspire to Serve US. Also, we ask you, if you're taking photos today, to please feel free to post them or live tweet using the hashtag Inspire to Serve. Recommendations that are gathered from the public via all forums, whether it be here in person, via our website, or social media, will be critical in shaping the Commission's recommendations. The Commission believes that with your help, we can in fact ignite a national conversation and a movement that leaves every American eager and inspired to serve. Throughout tonight's meeting, on your chairs, you have a card that if you'd like to provide written feedback, you can do so. If you don't want to ask a question during the open period. Also listed are the list of questions that I had posted previously up on the slide for you to reference as we move through this evening's meetings. To kick off the conversation, I'd like to turn it over to fellow Commissioner Deborah Wada to introduce our panelists and moderate the discussion on the next generation of service. Ms. Wada was appointed by President Obama to the position of Assistant Secretary of Manpower and Reserve Affairs for the United States Army. In that position, she was responsible for all personnel, training, and readiness of the Army. Prior to her appointment, she worked on the U.S. House Armed Services Committee with responsibility for military personnel policy. She also worked for Senator Daniel Akaka, originally from Hawaii. Ms. Wada graduated from Drake University in Iowa with a degree in economics and political science and attended the Naval War College. Deborah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for the kind introduction. And we're honored to be here this evening. As Joe mentioned, the Commission is having a series of conversations to transform, that will transform into a series of recommendations that will be provided to Congress, the President, and ultimately to all of us here in the country. The service includes work that are done by volunteers, but it also includes those who serve in the military, as school teachers, in all levels of government, and much more. And so to kick off this discussion, we have a great panel this evening. We're joined by 4 community leaders who will discuss the current state of service in the country and also what service in the future might look like in Los Angeles, across California, and ultimately across the nation. So let me introduce one of our panelists. First is Layla Chavez Solomon. She's a returned Peace Corps volunteer. We have Christina Limos, the recruitment coordinator for LA Conservation Corps. Next, we have Mario Fedolin, who's the founder and executive director of Big Citizen Hub. And finally, we have, last but not least, is Matthew Leak, who is the California State's own Veterans Affairs representative. So let me extend a warm welcome to all 4 of you, and thank you for joining us this evening. So let's get started. So the question that I had to start off our conversation for the 4 of you is, could you share briefly with me, but also with our audience here this evening, a little bit about your work in LA and across the nation, in your case, Layla, abroad, as a Peace Corps volunteer?
Do you want me to start?
Certainly.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here to talk about my service. I just recently returned from Cambodia last year. I served there as an English teacher trainer, or education volunteer from 2015 through 2017. So my primary responsibility was to teach high school and increase their English literacy skills. And also I had the opportunity to start some secondary projects in literacy as well, such as starting library resources, gardening, and environmental clubs or committees, something like that. And so it was a very rewarding challenge, and I had always dreamed of becoming a Peace Corps volunteer since, I think, partly because I was also an AmeriCorps volunteer in college, but I think if I had to go back to the deepest root of why I wanted to serve is because as a Filipino woman and Filipino immigrant, I've been raised to really value education by my parents, and so it's become my passion. And so working in literacy back in AmeriCorps as an AmeriCorps volunteer with the LA Unified School District, I thought, what if I could do something like this and maybe do it abroad? And so then subsequently I learned about Peace Corps, and I thought, okay, so this opportunity exists. So one day I'm gonna try to do this, and so which I did. So now as a region Peace Corps volunteer, Peace Corps volunteers know that our service does not necessarily end with the service. We continue because we have 3 goals that we want to fulfill, which is one is to teach others technical skills. The second is to share our culture, American culture, with our host country wherever we serve. And the third is to share our experience, to share the culture of others when we talk to Americans once we return to the country. So I guess right now I'm fulfilling the third goal, which is to talk about my experience back in Cambodia. And it was, like I said, a rewarding challenge, and it was a dream come true, and I would do it again with maybe another country.
Great. Layla? Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Well, hello. Thank you so much for having me, for sure. Oh, hello. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Christina Lemos, and I really started my human service journey in Maryland. That's originally where I'm from. I would say I wanted to be like my mom when I grew up, and I still kind of do. She's an amazing woman. She works in human service. She's a social worker, now in HR, and that's what kind of exposed me initially to this field, just giving back and helping and really linking people to the right services in order for them to just be successful in whatever it is. And I think compassion is definitely the key ingredient that I have that helped me to get this far. Moving here to Los Angeles, it's been an incredible experience. I've learned a whole lot, and it differs, but still some of the same challenges. And the young people that we meet with, they constantly inspire me and motivate me to keep on going. So I'm just really grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. And Mario?
Good evening. My name is Mario. I use he, him pronouns. I did my core year, my AmeriCorps year with City Year, San Jose in 2003, 2004. I'm an alum, and I think being able to serve in my community, I was a 20-year-old kid, uneducated. 9/11 had just kind of taken place, and there's a lot of tension in the country. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't want to finish college. I thought it would get in my way. And I definitely didn't want to go to war. I come from a military family, and that was not something that I wanted to do. And the only reason I actually walked into that recruitment office for City Year was that when I was in high school, because growing up on any east side of most cities, you have a lot of similar challenges. And my family, even though we're a middle-class family, still had a lot of those challenges: drugs, gangs, alcoholism, all of those things. And so when I was in high school, because my brother had such a tough experience ahead of me, a lot of his teachers took a liking to me and wanted to make sure there was something that they could create a safe social safety net around me. And I had an opportunity to go to this really amazing camp and have this really amazing experience with this really cool young Latino man, and he was a City Year Corps member. So when I was 20 years old, I had the experience working with a young person, and so when I had the opportunity, when I didn't know what I wanted to do, I saw this symbol, this yellow jacket in my neighborhood, and I was like, oh, maybe I could do that. Because I remember he worked with young people. I was like, maybe I could work with kids, because that sounds like something cool. 6 weeks later, I was thrust onto a diverse team. I was the only brown kid doing the service work in my community, with a white woman from Indiana who had her college education, a white man from Orange County who had his education, a black woman from Atlanta, and I had to figure out how to reconcile all those different identities and whatever they brought to the table, but try to figure out how to make sure it worked in my neighborhood with my family and my friends. And that experience was life-changing for me. It taught me about who I was, what I could do. And then 6 months after that, I continued my service as an AmeriCorps member in City Year Philadelphia, taking the programs we ran in San Jose, launching them in Philly, and trying to figure that out. And now I was a 21-year-old kid leading a program. And by the time when they wanted to open up City or here in Los Angeles, they wanted to have these youth programs that I was running across the country. So they asked a 24-year-old kid from the East Side if he wanted to come to Los Angeles and help them open up their organization. I said, hell yes. And I took that call and I came here. I landed here about 11 years ago, opening up City or LA, and you know, working with AmeriCorps, thousands of AmeriCorps members since. And so when I left City Year, or when I was like coming up with this, I was kind of tired. I was working at LUSD, and I was like, well, if I was 20 years old and I had this really robust, amazing experience that changed the course of what I would end up doing, what if I had that experience when I was 11? How different would my life be? If I had one inflection point when I was 11 years old that would shift the course of my experience, where I got to see diverse people, work with people like me, got to work on something that was important, that made me feel like a whole person, I should do that. And so I decided to leave City Year and open up my own organization called Big Citizen Hub, and that's what we're doing. We're bringing young people from across the city of Los Angeles together, South Central, from Watts, Boyle Heights, Beverly Hills, and Santa Monica, and putting them on diverse teams and looking at issues like immigration, gender justice, housing, and figuring out what we could do as young people to change the world.
Hello, my name is Matthew Keels. I served in the Army from the year 2010 until 2015. After I left the service, I noticed that there was a need for assistance with veterans. Veterans needed a lot of assistance. So I figured the only way that I could really assist in veterans at the capacity that I was currently at was to return to school. So I'm actually a student here at Cal State LA. I'm also the Veterans Affairs representative for the student government here at Cal State LA, and I'm also the president for Salute Veterans National Honor Society. One thing that I really am hoping to do is get my bachelor's degree in social work here and then go on to graduate school to get my MSW. I'm really trying to focus on creating policies that help veterans transition out of the military and also help with their lifestyle after the military. Thank you.
Well, Matthew, I'm going to start with you since you're at the end. As a veteran and a student, can you share your thoughts on how schools can work to engage with organizations like yours and maybe even other service organizations like Mario?
So one good thing that I know that is really helpful is Cal State LA, they host events. So they host events and they seek out organizations to come to these events and to speak to students, and I think that's really at the bulk of where you're going to get most student interest is at these events that the school hosts. And I feel that the students, especially going into your senior year of your undergrad and stuff like that, we need these service opportunities. It's one thing to say that you have a college degree, but it's another thing to say you have a college degree, but you've also done all of this other stuff. I feel, especially in today's society, it's so easy to say you have a college degree, but it's what else have you done? It's not just a college degree anymore. You need to have a background in something. You need to have some kind of experience. So I think getting these service organizations to show up to Cal State LA to pitch their organizations and everything to these students, I feel like that's the best way to get these students to be involved.
Thanks. Mario, you designed a civic leadership program for youth that you just mentioned. Can you share your thoughts on civic education, the current state of civic education that you've seen, and discuss what reforms or changes you might propose?
Well, when we're talking about civic education, you're talking about textbook, kind of like how does a bill become a law? Mm-hmm. And that's coming from a person or a series of people that write the books, right? Which doesn't represent my family or my community most of the time. Mm-hmm. So how does civic education, what does it mean for like civic participation doesn't necessarily mean the same thing to my neighborhood and my community that it does the West Side. So how do you start to think about bridging communities in a meaningful way to do person-to-person dialogue, conversation, and really thinking about how we move the needle on things that are important to us, right? And I had this, and I was working in Philadelphia, and I had this, I think City Year kept asking me, well, how do we get more Latino men to do service in Philly? And I was asking my mentor, his name is Johnny Irizarry in Philadelphia, and I was working in the brown community out there, and we were trying to figure out how do I get more people involved in this work. And he was like, you know what, Mario, we do service. We do, as a community, do service. We help our families babysit. We make sure that we help our neighbors with their groceries. We give to our church. We show up to church. And so when we think about civic participation, we're talking about it as if it's a widget, right? You do these things, you're successful this way, when we really should be thinking about how do I contribute How do I contribute meaningfully for the person next to me? And how do we learn all of those things, right? It's still a huge, one of the biggest challenges I see with how we do this participation is that I feel like it's built for us to contribute to an economic, to the ends where we're trying to build or develop or produce, right? We're not necessarily trying to learn how to contribute and exist. And that's a problem. We're thinking about centering a whole system around capitalism with these zero-sum games, this individualized and that's not what service is. I know that. Everyone on this panel knows that service becomes less about you, more about the whole. But when we're talking about how we push our young people through systems and talk about how they engage with said systems, it is about you do this and this is what you get out of it. Talking about college education, right now I have a 2-year-old daughter. And I'm not planning for her college education. I'm trying to figure out what she's going to do when she wants to be her whole self. Because that's what we really should be thinking about. And so, I get tangential because, civic participation or civic education is not going to get any better because the textbooks we have already been written don't reflect me and my community in the way that I think they should. And if we really want to do what is on the next, if I'm looking ahead 10 years and we're looking at Gen Z and how they want to participate with each other, it's going to be different than we did in the 20s, right? That's why Boy Scouts of America is having its own challenges right now as it's rebranding and trying to figure out what it's doing, is because times have changed. So the way we talk about this stuff has to change. I don't talk about service anymore with my young people. I don't call it service at Big Citizen Hub anymore. It's not relevant because it doesn't fit for everyone. But we got to talk about how do we contribute together and push each other forward.
Thank you. Christina, as a recruiter, can you share with us how service as a mechanism for students can act as a catalyst for change?
I have to agree with what you said earlier in the sense that you have to build those meaningful relationships with these young people. You have to connect with them. You have to find something to engage them, get them excited. And just having somebody who can indeed represent them, it gives them that sense of familiarity, just really knowing who exactly they're working with. And perhaps you've gone through my struggle. Perhaps you understand truly and where I'm coming from. And just finding ways to connect them and get them excited about what it is that we're trying to do and hopefully motivating them so that they can make that self-decision to want to do it. Mm-hmm.
Right, thank you. Layla, as you shared with us a little bit why you joined the Peace Corps, but could you share with us sort of any other benefits that you found after your experience being a Peace Corps volunteer overseas?
Benefits after coming back?
From your experience as a Peace Corps.
From my experience,
yeah.
yes. So I was just talking to somebody about this. It's a paradox of, when you live here in America and you feel like, oh, I need to get out of here and then make a difference somewhere, and then you come back, you realize that, there are things that you actually take for granted while you're living here. And then I kind of tie it back to what has been said, that you also have a community here that has needs the same way that another country has needs. And so trying to kind of, so I think just to empathize with others, but also what do you do when you go there and then what do you do when you come back? And how do you bridge those two experiences? And so I think that me just learning that Cambodia has taught me that I need to be more active in my community. So that was kind of, that was what I had in mind, that when I get back to my community, when I get back to LA, I need to take care of my family. Actually, that's what I was thinking because for a while I was able to do this because of my family. And the settled immigrants, they really sacrificed a lot for me to be at the point where I could actually take advantage of the opportunity of becoming a Peace Corps volunteer, which is a privilege. So knowing that was a privilege, I know that coming back, I also had to give back to my family who had allowed me to do that. So it's an ongoing paradox of just recognizing that as much as you want to go out there, when you come back, you also don't take for granted the community that you've always had, such as LA. We have our own needs, and if you're here, if you have a hand, an extra pair of hand, or if you have passion for service or passion for something that gets you excited, that could make a difference, that is something that you can actually do here. You don't need to go out. You don't have to go to Cambodia to make that happen. So yeah.
Great, thank you. So I guess this is a question for any of you or all four of you if you want to answer, but so what is sort of the best practices that you have found in service to cultivate youth leadership? And also, what is the biggest challenges that you have identified in servicing and encouraging the youth leadership in service?
So I think it kind of goes back to what they were saying is building these relationships. The problem with a lot of service organizations is they're all like email and flyer, but especially with the youth is more face to face, and you actually have to build these relationships. A youth member is not going to read a flyer and be like, I'm totally interested in this. They want that face to face connection. They want to see a person, engage with them, and explain to them, this is what we're doing, this is what we're trying to do, these are our goals. But when you just kind of like, hey, you mentioned Boy Scouts of America, when you're just like, hey, join Boy Scouts of America, but you're not talking about what is it that they're doing, what is their goals, what are we about? I think that's one of the biggest problems with getting any youth involved in any organization is they need to see the facts, they need to see what's going on. It's hard to just hand someone a pamphlet and be like, join our organization.
Yeah.
I say this in I love AmeriCorps. I go to bat for AmeriCorps and national service in every aspect I can. I talk to my young people about it. I tell all of my high school students, like, you got to do a year of service before you go to college, or right when you get out of college, you got to do your year of service. Just let me know. I'll hook you up. But at the same time, right now, AmeriCorps is run by white women. That's not the organization that I necessarily am attracted to. Right? Who's talking to me? Right? Where are the other Marios who are at the table, who are making decisions, who are in the places we need them to be, so that I have access to them? Right? I want to build a pipeline to national service. Big Citizen Hub is a pathway. Right? I am not trying to create the next college graduate or the next person we're trying to figure out, I want to build a pathway for a young person who sees challenges, who sees problems in front of them, has a network of other people that they're connected with, and eventually they start to fill the benches of folks running our institutions like an AmeriCorps or working inside of these AmeriCorps programs. And I think that's what we should do. We should start, if you're talking about how are we building a bench, it's like, how do we build a thoughtful bench of people who have good representation that are actually in our communities, right? Because here's the problem. The problem is if national service is trying to fix problems or challenges in our communities, but it's full of, and again, I don't hate white women, but it's full of white women who are doing the work of communities that need to be nurtured by brown and black men, women, people of color, queer people that are at the table helping them see themselves as full people. And until we could do that, service is still going to be a transaction, right? I get my MacBook serviced. People don't get serviced. And if we do, we're doing it wrong.
So what is the challenges you see in trying to create that bench?
You have to be you have to be a legal citizen to do AmeriCorps, right? So that's already a challenge, right? Boom. The amount that AmeriCorps pays you on a stipend is not enough. It's how I don't know how. Well, when I was younger, I was poor, so when I was doing my stipend was like, yeah, so consistent funding. But not everyone has. I mean, we're running. If you're a 17-year-old, 18-year-old that's helping to run the family, and then you have to go to school and work and pay for your own education, all those things, we need to pay more, right? Which is also a huge problem with generally the nonprofit sector doesn't pay their people enough, and they're doing good work, and so they take the pay cuts, which is BS in my opinion. Let's pay people a living wage, right? So how do we create? But instead, if I want to join the Army, I know that I could get money because I'm in the armed forces. I'm living on barracks. I'm not spending money on my life, at least when I'm out in service, and so I'm able to save. Plus, the GI Bill is a way that gets you access to education. But that's not even a promise anymore, right? So then, what is AmeriCorps gives you $6,000 to do after your year of service? Fine, that's great, and a university might double it. Great, but I think there needs to be a double down. Pay people a living wage. Have it be like this is an accelerator, and not for bad kids, right? Because that was the thing. All my family was like, no, Mario, you shouldn't do AmeriCorps because you're not a bad kid. You got a head on your shoulders, and they got it all wrong. It was an accelerator for me. Mm-hmm. It moved me forward. It moved me faster in places I could have never gone without it. But it's still a stigma. Because the market and the economy is saying that you have to have a college degree if you're going to make it, so I got to go get my paper so I can take care of my family and I can take care of the next generation of people in my community. That's what the market is dictating, but it's also not living up to its promise. But if we could create a national service program that allows people to be able to make $1, a living wage, that promises them, access to education either at a lower rate or the GI Bill that works for them to pay for that, and they can still then get their paper to take care of their family, that sounds like a winning plan.
Okay, thank you. Christina, do you have any?
I think also that there's just a lot of different organizations that do offer the same thing. So it's really just building that meaningful relationship with that person and having them believe in the mission at hand. Because we are, so much technology, it's always the next best thing, it's always getting excited about what's the newest thing on the market. Well, it's the same thing kind of in the job world too. If it doesn't work out here, there's another place. So it's just finding that way to just engage them, get them excited, really, really help them to find that faith so that it becomes organic for them to want to just build up. Yeah.
Leila, do you have any?
Yes, I echo what everybody said, and I think that if we incentivize service, I know they say there's a saying that the reward of service is service itself, the reward of kindness is kind of kindness itself, but a lot of youth today are struggling, the millennials, the generation right now, they're in debt as far as student loans and all of that, and they have a lot of passions in education and health and a lot of things and serving, but then they also have to help out their families and also help themselves up. So if they can't stand on their own feet, it's kind of like the airplane. Before you can serve others, you have to help yourself. You have to take the oxygen mask first before you can do it up for others. And so, like I said, that's exactly what happened to me. Is because I had family that helped me stand up, and then when I was able to stand up, then I could also help others stand up. But I know that echoing what has been said, it's no longer enough to just say the reward of service is service itself. Because out of altruism, pure altruism, there are a lot of youth, and not just youth, all ages would like to serve, but they have other obligations, and especially when it comes to finances. But if there's a lot more incentives to join, something like that, I think that would really help draw more people to serve, whether here, domestic, or abroad.
Okay, I just have one final question because I know we're getting close to the end. But do you think if we think a mandatory service requirement for all Americans would be necessary, valuable, or possible? Mandatory.
No.
Okay.
To me,
Yeah.
So to me, voluntary is voluntary. So I feel like coming from a Peace Corps background, and it's called Peace Corps volunteer, I feel like mandatory is an oxymoron. Mandatory and voluntary oxymoron. So it's contradictory. So
Right.
it defeats the purpose of saying that this is a Peace Corps volunteer program if you are mandated to do it. It's like what they say, the joke, you're being voluntold to serve. So it's not really voluntary. So it defeats that. It defeats the word.
I agree. I think definitely you got to look at too is when you make it mandatory for someone to do service, what's the morale like? What's the work ethic like? At this point, are you really achieving that goal of service if you're mandating that people have to do it? Is it really service at that point, or is it work? And I think that's something that we need to take a look at.
Well, appreciate you folks sharing your thoughts with us this evening or this afternoon. So thank you all, and for the productive discussion. And please join me in giving our panelists a round of applause for coming. And on that note, I'm handing the mic back to Joe.
Well, thanks, Deborah. So now's the opportunity for all of you to provide your recommendations, your comments, or to ask questions of the Commission or of our panelists. Before we do, though, I'd like to lay out a couple of ground rules. First, any member of the audience is welcome to share comments publicly to the Commission. And again, you can ask questions of our panelists We do ask that you limit your question to 2 minutes in order to allow it for as many people as possible to have an opportunity. Please raise your hand if you have a comment, recommendation, or question. I will select individuals to speak, so please be patient and wait until I call on you. Since it's hard to hear in this room when it is your turn, staff will walk over with a microphone. Staff, can you please identify yourselves? So please wait till the microphone reaches you. Second, we ask that all remarks relate to the mission of the Commission and the topics our panelists covered this evening. Finally, as I shared earlier, in addition to the public remarks here today, we also encourage you, your families, your friends, people that you know that haven't been able to come here today to share more. So again, please either take this card and fill it out, or bring it home and give it to somebody else to fill out, or go to our website, inspiredtoserve.gov, and provide your comments via the web. With that, we'll take our first question from the gentleman right here in the blue shirt.
Thank you.
Wait.
Okay.
Sure. My name is Joe Maislich from Los Angeles, and I remembered here today that my toes were freezing when on January 20th, 1961, outside the Capitol building, I heard John Kennedy talk about what you can do for your country and enunciate the idea that became the Peace Corps. I'm excited that there is discussion along all these lines today. I was already donating a lot of time, though college student, to support of the movement in the U.S. South and later Los Angeles for immigration and civil rights. Those things will probably always have to be extras for which people aren't paid. The new things start that way. But as far as growing the spirit of volunteering, which I agree does not have to mean donation of your time, there are a couple of things that I hope the Commission will reach unanimity on. One of them is, let's do something with that student debt burden that people are either carrying or looking at. Doesn't that freeze things and make it very difficult for the creative burst of energy that I saw, I felt, I participated in among my age mates in the 1960s, to do creative, daring things, creative discomfort, let's say. Another part of it is the excellent pay. Mario and others mentioned also that this, here, we got this tax cuts for the top end people, and folks, what happens to people from the communities that most need to be built when people can't serve it? As far as the coercion points, I agree with what's mentioned there. Coincidentally, for myself, as a graduate student, I volunteered in a way during the Vietnam War time. I relinquished my student deferment, so I have the privilege of standing with the soldiers who were refusing service and the other young people who were refusing to participate in wars, and we got more of them today than we did then. And served for that. I got room and board, 2.5 years in the U.S. prisons, and I was pleased with that opportunity to volunteer that was provided by a coercive system that I hope we can do away with now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next. Right up here up front, please. And if you just wait for the microphone to come.
Hi, my name is Peter Chisella. I'm a Vietnam era veteran that went into the U.S. Air Force medical field rather than being drafted through the lottery system into the Army. And then I had some experiences that it occurred to me that we needed a youth energy corps. In '79, in San Jose, California, Congressman Pete McCluskey proposed radically changing the selective service program, and a lot of what you're looking at was proposed in his legislative bill. One of the key components he had was to have both males and females register at 17 in order to facilitate a dialogue in their communities about what are your goals about ethos, what is civic engagement, civic service, and then the only mandatory requirement other than registering at 17 was feedback at 18th birthday of yes, no, or maybe towards a further commitment. And I realized that the Defense Department spends about $1 billion on military recruiting, and if they were to give the Selective Service System $25 million, I'm sure they could set up an internet system to do this, but they would have to get Congress to authorize that. So I hope the Commission can bring that up as a possibility, in light especially of President Macron's proposal to have French youth register at age 16 and participate in a similar discussion, but more on a week-by-week basis. So that's my question to the young people here. Would they feel okay to have both males and females register with the Selective Service at an earlier age in order to facilitate a discussion about what you're talking about. And but in that manner, pull in high schools and pull in educational school boards so that they realize that it's their responsibility to find what their parameters are about their youth and their meanings and values on civic service, not the federal government's, and they just provide overhead guidelines.
Great question. So I'll pose that then to the panelists. Does anybody of the panelists have thoughts on requiring registration at age 17 of males and females in order to start this dialogue?
I worry about my community, my mixed status families. So if you're 16 years old and your parents are undocumented and you have to fill out a form and somehow you have to out the fact that your parents don't have status and what that would mean for them and that safety. So no. It was just the way that I'm thinking about it right now. Not necessarily, but it doesn't. I mean, there would have to be a lot that would have to go into that.
Anyone else on the panelists have a comment on the question?
In my opinion, I do agree with maybe a discussion when you're 17, but that kind of already happens. That you don't have to register for the Selective Service, but the military comes to high schools and they do these in-large ASVABs and all that stuff to get high school students to take that ASVAB who are interested in joining the military and to actually take the ASVAB and then talk to a recruiter afterwards. So I'm not so sure about having them register at 17 and then make a yes or no by 18. I do agree with maybe a discussion when you're 17, but more in line to not just Selective Service, but what are your plans? What are your plans after high school? I know a lot of times people will join the military because maybe they didn't get an opportunity to plan after high school, and so I think a discussion on what are your plans after high school and including service in there is definitely something I would agree with.
Great. Another question? Yes, up front here.
Thanks. I'm Charles Goldman from Los Angeles, and I really appreciated the 4 panelists who shared your experiences with us today. I found them all very meaningful. And I'd like to ask you, if I may, a question. What do you think governments at different levels, whether federal, state, local, could do to help get more young people to serve in the kinds of ways that you have? And I recognize that Mario also provided some earlier answers to that.
So I can definitely answer this, and it's kind of what Mario spoke on, is there needs to be some kind of promise or something. So with the military, with organization, any kind of service, there needs to be a sort of promise at the end. Like if you do, whether it be in incentivizing service, whether it be job outlook. A lot of problems with people enlisted in the military is they get out of the military and they can't find a job. So if there was, and I know there's the GI Bill and stuff like that, but if there was just some kind of promise that you do the service and we will continue to look after you. I mean, you chose to give up certain things to serve not just your country but your communities. We're going to continue. Thank you for your service. Now let us serve you, kind of thing.
Anyone else on the panel with the thoughts? Okay. Yes, sir. Gentleman right up front here.
Is that an order? Excuse me. All right. My name is Joe. I'm a member of 3 different veterans organizations. One is Veterans for Peace. The other is the Disabled American Veterans. And the third and final one is the Native American Veterans Association. Now, I've heard a lot of good words. I'm talking about a lot of good words today with the panelists talking about, and the good words that are printed in print here on the Commission's broad aspirational mandate, taking the words right off of this. I see where military, national, and public service are being fostered by this commission. Now, I have a big issue with the meaning of service. I get approached all the time about thanking me for my service. I was 18 years old when I joined the Marine Corps. I didn't know what I was doing, Mario. But I was 18 years old. So, as I went into the Marine Corps and I got on boot camp, I found out real quick. And whenever anybody approaches me and asks me, or tells me, we really do thank you for your service, I says, well, you're welcome. I really want to appreciate your thankfulness and your appreciation for my service, but I didn't serve much. All I did was kill those people in order to keep you safe here at home, and they turn and walk away from me. Now, the military teaches you one thing, and that is to kill, to defend yourself, and kill anybody that is trying to kill you. So that goes far and above, beyond the public service that it's talking about here. I would like to see mandatory conscription of politicians and their sons and daughters. If they want to be a public service, then go join the military. We have a president right now who got out of service by saying that he had bone spurs. I wish I'd have thought of that back in '58 when I joined the military. So I would like to continue this conversation with the panelists about this thing about let's have a conversation. We have had this conversation before. War is not good for any living thing. And the families that have been destroyed from the war, we have issues with. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your comments today. Yes, sir. Here in the front.
Hi, my name is Andrew Harrell. I'm from Beverly Hills. Seems my generation seems to be a little crotchety and not too enthusiastic about conscription, and I'm one of them. On my mother's side, my family was in the military all the way back to the Revolutionary War. World War II, they all went into the CIA. And a number of them were involved in the secret war in Laos, 50s and the 60s. And they sat down with us kids and said, we want you to pledge to protest and complain as much as you can about the war that's coming. They basically said we're assassins. That's what our job is. We torture, interrogate, and assassinate people. And it certainly had the effect. Nobody in my generation has served in the military, don't intend to. My wife's side of the family is from France. They were in the Vichy government, part of naval intelligence, and then in Vietnam of naval intelligence. And that side of the family has the same opinion about this. I'm dead against conscription. There are many studies that show that when you have conscription, it's unfair. It's a tax on the people who serve. It's bad for the economy. My father's side of the family was very pragmatic. In the Vietnam War, they shorted the stock market and made $22 million. So some gain from war, a lot lose. So I'm against conscription. In France, my two daughters are registered there. France does not have conscription. The way they get registered there is through their National Health Care Service. And if you want people to register in this country, give them universal health care, make it part of that. Start giving them something worth serving for. I'm an attorney now, as well as a scientist. I was a professor for 40 years. And I basically, for a number of years now, I'm part of MAP, the Military Assistance Program. I defend soldiers. Next week, we're bringing suit against the U.S. Army, Department of State, Department of Defense.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yes. Hang on to the mic.
Good afternoon, everybody. Gotta make this quick. I got 2 minutes to talk about this. My name is Isaac Giappa. I served in the United States Marine Corps from 2013 to 2017. Mario, early on in your introduction, you talked about how when 2011 happened, you wanted nothing to do with the war. And that's something I see with the students here on campus who are 18, 19 years old. In order to get military participation, you gotta understand that just because you're in the military, you're not gonna go into a combat zone. Once you grasp this concept that you're not gonna go in a combat zone and your life is not gonna be put in danger, I feel like mandatory service could be optional for everybody. Once they get to understand that they will not be in any harm's way, they will not be, thrown into a combat position. Matthew, talked about how in terms of like, just because you have a college education does not really mean a whole lot. You have to have like a background, you have to have some sort of work history. I feel like that too plays a big part of it in terms of addressing it to the public. There are some really good qualities that the military can instill in our young generation in terms of being a team player. Stand up for what is right, stand up for what you believe in. If you got something to say it. And the third thing I would like to recommend in terms of getting military participation, since I just got out of the Marine Corps a year ago, one of the things I saw, which was kind of like the downfall for like a lot of the men and stuff, where they found it really unfair, was in terms of the standards. One of the requirements to get into the Marine Corps is that the men have to do a minimum of 5 pull-ups, as opposed to the women that have to do 1. I feel like if you want equality, it has to go all the way across, because I saw a lot of men, young men, getting, felt like it was unfair, and it felt like it wasn't right, so they got turned away from joining the military because standards were not equal. Those are just 3 things I would like to talk about in terms of getting more military participation. So I do feel like military service should be a mandatory thing.
Great. Thank you very much for being here today and for your comments. In the back. Yes.
Hi. I had just a question that I was thinking about, because as I look around this room, I do see a lot of people with life experience. I myself have very little life experience, and hearing these things to someone my age, it's not that exciting. We'd rather hear about parties or fashion, the newest drink or whatever that's coming out, and this is something that is going to greatly affect not only my generation, but those of us younger than us, the generations to come. And my question to the panel is, how are we really going to grab the attention of all of our younger generations? Because you can have conversations with them, you can talk to them all you want, we can pretend to listen. Trust me, I do it all the time. We're not going to gain anything from it. We're going to walk out from whatever conversation you guys spent 5 hours talking to us about and immediately go on our phones and what celebrity is doing what. And so I'm just curious, like, is there a plan to actually grab young people's attention to make them realize everything that is going on with this country and what possibly is to come?
Thank you. So, I think both Mario and John?
Matthew.
I'm sorry. Talked about, building relationships, right? So how do you get their attention to get the open door to start building a relationship to kind of get them to want to serve? What kind of ideas do you have about starting that relationship? How do you grab their attention? Right, you're the recruiter.
Well, for me as a recruiter, I think technology is so big right now. I literally am texting, I'm emailing, I'm calling. It's really meeting them halfway. Just finding the way to connect with them, whatever the best way is. Instagram, Facebook, all of these different social media platforms. It's not going down to their level. It's coming to see you where you are so that we can meet. And just find a way, that common ground to be able to communicate. And just being as open as free so that me as a recruiter, I have to also, get with the times. I have to get with the times. If I want to engage you, if I want to get you excited, I have to totally understand what it is that it takes in order to engage them. So for me, definitely the technology piece is just being completely clear and transparent with exactly the expectation and meeting them halfway.
How to make service attractive on social media. So for me, just what you said is not going down to their level. We have to start treating the youth as intelligent. Maybe they're a little bit distracted, but if you expect them that we're, a lot of them are just focused on the non-important things, but actually they are very intelligent, but they also want to be given a voice and choice. And with service, when I chose to serve, I wish that we have the freedom to make that decision, and because I'm concerned about the maturity level. So, for instance, to me, transparency was really important when I signed up for the Peace Corps. I actually had thought about it on a whim, maybe when I was right after college. But then, having waited and really kind of lived life and really weighing the pros and cons, the more honest my recruiters were with me, they were really ready to tell me the reality. And then they said, Layla, there's a 6-month honeymoon period for Peace Corps. It's going to wear out. And then that's when you really have to really serve. After the 6 months or after the high is gone and it's all low, and then you have to pick yourself up. So just talking about the realities of service, whatever it is, military, national, public service, or Peace Corps service, I think just, be real with us, with the youth, and let them know what they are really signing up for, and then make them, let them decide, because they're hopefully, they'll make the right decisions when they are very well informed.
This generation is on fire right now. So you talk about Generation Z, like they're going to be more out of pocket. They're going to be not wanting to serve in our institutions like the way that we've all served or other folks have served. So it's just going to have to be different, right? You probably put the wrong people on the panel. You probably should have put some 11-year-olds because ultimately they're going to have to pay for whatever decision that you make.
Mm-hmm. Good point. All right, next question. This ma'am right here. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Kate, and I'm thank you. My son is 21 now, but he had to register with the Selective Service in order to apply for financial aid. He did it under protest. He was a conscientious objector. He wrote on the form that he was doing it under protest. I feel like it was a huge burden on him to have to do that. He wasn't able to say who he was, and he was being coerced to sign up for something, for a list. I'm looking up there and I see the first question. Is military draft or draft contingency still a necessary component of U.S. national security? I think not. What the money from the Selective Service should be taken, put into support for education and job training, and maybe to support AmeriCorps and the Peace Corps. Both those things could use more support, but there's no need for it as a component of national security. There's already, like the person was saying about give people health care. We already have Social Security numbers. We already have a list of people. If there was a national emergency, it would be easy to call people up. Another thing is it's focused, the Selective Service is a huge burden on men between 18 and 26. There's no reason to expand that burden to women between that age, or women of any age. Nobody should be coerced into service. I really appreciate that everybody in the panel said that for their organization, there's no reason to make it a coerced voluntary service. It just is the antithesis of volunteerism. It should be abolished. If there was ever a draft, as I was saying, there's multiple ways to harvest that information. When people are coerced to register by linking it to things like college, financial aid, and government, they're forced to go against their conscience, as my son was. The barriers up there to participation in national military and public service. I'm also a member of the Santa Barbara Friends meeting, the Quakers, and we put out a statement in answer to that. The barriers to military service may include serving in undeclared, unconstitutional military actions, loss of freedom, loss of educational opportunities, health, family, personal necessities, post-traumatic stress, moral injury, military sexual assault, and the violation of personal life philosophies. I hope that you guys will seriously consider reinvesting the money of the Selective Service, abolish the Selective Service, and transfer the money into other places that really are serving our community, our world.
Thank you. Yes, sir, right over here. Yep, one's coming over. Oh.
Hello everybody, my name is Thomas Minter, U.S. Navy veteran, 11 years. My wife also is a Navy veteran, 5 years. We're both full-time students. She's here at LA and I'm down at ELAC. So a few issues I wanted to address. So the questions on the board, reoccurring themes with the panel, and a couple solutions I think are very easy to come by. Okay, so one, the questions that you have on the board: should the draft be present? Is it even necessary? Mandatory service requirements, things like that. It all kind of comes down to this, guys. Is you're looking for an attitude. Okay, you're looking for someone, again, what's going to enforce patriotism. Okay, when 9/11 happened, I took it as a personal hit. That's why I joined the military. I took that this country, this soil was attacked, and it needed to be protected. So it's my job as a citizen. That's something that all of us seem to forget, that we have a responsibility as a citizen to protect this country and to enforce the traditions that we have. Okay, so I know everybody wants to make their own decision and do whatever they want, but what happens to the country if everybody's doing what they want? If everybody's out to just get what's theirs, where's the nation come into all of that? If everybody's just looking out for their own community, where does the nation fall in all of that? See, that's the problem here. Because you guys want an attitude. You want to dangle a carrot in front of a kid? Give them more money? No, make them earn it. So here's my solution. All those questions on the board, selective service. You can do it at a community level. You can do it at a national level. You can do it at a federal level. You can go serve overseas. You can serve on AmeriCorps. You can fix up your community. But if you make it a mandatory service that everybody gets a sense of pride, you make it voluntary to whatever level they want to do it at. You don't say you have to join the military. You say, hey, you can join the military, or you can go to your community and you can help build schools. You can clean up stuff. You can do the things like you do, Mario, in your guys' community that are much necessary. All right? But then you're kind of saying to the people there, if you want the benefits of this country, then essentially protect those benefits. How do we protect those benefits? By serving the country, by enforcing the things that we have, such as laws. How else are we going to perpetuate that? What are we teaching the other kids coming behind us, the 11-year-old? Hey, give me everything you want, but don't do anything for it? That's my question to you guys. Where's the responsibility on the citizen?
Thank you. Was that a rhetorical question, or would you like me to pose that to the panelists?
No, please, go ahead.
Okay. Anybody want to respond?
I don't disagree with you. I just also we also have to recognize some of the real challenges that my community stands in, right? And so it's really hard for, my community where, there isn't a living wage. There are not systems that allow them to be really successful. A lot of us do. I'm fine. I got out, but that's bootstrapping, and I don't believe in bootstrapping. And you can't expect someone just to kind of always continue to bootstrap. You also got to figure out how do we create an environment so that people can grow, and so that's where I'm also thinking too. It's like, well, how do you build a system? How do you shift some of our systems so that young people could be their whole selves and not have to worry about all the stressors? And so when you talk about citizenship and patriotism, sometimes it's hard when you're facing down, a lot of the biggest challenges that a lot of us, including your community, may also feel like. Where there's also a sense of it's hard to feel patriotic sometimes for some of my community members. I'm not saying for everyone or blanking it, but those are some of the challenges that I'm hearing from our young people when we're asking them to come and do community service. When we're like, well, my parent has to work a couple of jobs and it's really hard for me to do this, and that's why I have to miss all these different days to be able to do that. Where is the line? And I think that's the part of where I have to I can't say blanket, you should all be patriotic for this thing, when we have a lot of marginalized communities and people, and there's some. In my order of things, I think we got to figure out how to fix a lot of our systems so that everyone can contribute in a way that's meaningful for them.
Thanks, Ryan. It's interesting because the commission has heard that yesterday from the students that we met with out at DLAC, and then today we met with service program leaders from the LA area, and many of them had that same comment that you just made today, that it's hard in certain communities to say, why should I serve this country based on how they perceive how their community is being treated. So thanks for sharing that. Question? Yes, sir, right here.
Can I address the question as well?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I know earlier that you mentioned that you served in the Navy for 11 years, and you're in school now, correct? You're in school at ELAC. My recommendation is there should be a promise. So when you left the Navy after 11 years of service, there should have been someone that says, there's a job for you. There's something waiting for you. The fact that you're in school to look for a job, that should never be the case. The GI Bill is great because it offers you that opportunity to go to school because you served in the Navy for 11 years. But what I'm recommending is so right now the military has this thing called the PACE program, right? And when you join the military, they say, hey, we'll guarantee you an interview. Well, when I joined the military, it was, we'll guarantee you an interview with the sheriff's department. A lot of people don't want to join the police after they've been in the military. So what I'm recommending is either expand that, or if you're serving 11 years in the Navy, you should have gotten out of the Navy and been able to find employment, gainful employment, a career after serving 11 years. I understand if you want to go to school, that's fantastic, but the fact is you should have been able to find gainful employment. And some people do, but I just feel a lot of, and I've been working with veterans throughout school since I've been in school, so a lot of the problems is when veterans are in school, it's because they could not find a job. It's because they could not find gainful employment. And that's why you have the GI Bill to help with that. But there just should be something after you leave the military that says, we know that you served in the Navy for 11 years, and we love that, and thank you so much for serving for 11 years. We have these employers lined up who want to hire somebody who just spent 11 years of their lives in the Navy, who sacrificed time with their family, sacrificed possible marriages, sacrifice raising kids, sacrifice all this stuff. There should be a promise at the end of that that says, we will look out for you, we will look after you. And I feel like that's not there right now when people leave the military, and that's why people choose to utilize the GI Bill, because there is no promise after you leave the military, and that's what I'm recommending.
Thank you. Yes, gentleman right here.
Hi, my name is Michael Meredith, and I have been a high school teacher for 15 years. I'm now retired, but I have a pretty good feel for those high school students I was dealing with all that time. And I want to focus on this very top question that you posed on the board at the beginning, and that is, as far as I can tell, at this point in our country's evolution, there is no value, and in fact there's a real detriment to maintaining the selective service system. As was mentioned by another speaker, the ability to get student loans is being attached to that. In over half of the states, I understand by now, the states have said that they're going to connect the ability to get a driver's license to this. It serves us no purpose. This is, we don't need just warm bodies like we did in the First World War, the Second World War, maybe Korea, God knows, maybe even Vietnam. Right now, see, you mentioned, Mr. Moderator, that teaching is perhaps a service, and I think it was, and it is still. We need more educated people. The military and industry needs more educated people. Money that is presently spent on the selective service apparatus, which certainly should not be extended to women, it's going the wrong direction. That money, as also has been mentioned here so far, is too small, but it still could be taken and put into a living wage for some of these many real, humane, public service organizations, operations here today, and many, many others. And for support so people don't have to come out of their education with burdensome, impossible debt. We can do better. We need a better educated population that feels they have a stake in our society, personal stake. That brings the volunteerism you're talking about.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we have time for two more questions, so I'm going to go over here for this gentleman first. Yes. Yep.
Thank you so much. You feel comfortable holding that okay? Okay. Thank you all so much for this chance to talk. My name is Sam Coleman. I'm a lecturer in Asian Studies, Japan specialist at Cal State Long Beach. It just occurred to me as everyone was talking, you know, I look at my take-home salary in the high three figures every month, and I'm still doing public service. I was a conscientious objector during the Vietnam War. It took a long time to come around to it. I had to leave graduate school, and do 2.5 years of service in a veterans hospital, where I took care of a lot of guys who had it far worse than I did. And I'm so glad that there are people from my generation talking about the consequences of a draft. Because I think it's important for the atmosphere here that we know that underneath the beautiful velvet glove of public service is the iron fist of arbitrary state power. Now, I have 2 sons on either end of the millennial generation, 25 and 30. We wrote out life insurance policies. Okay? They address letters to themselves. They're postmarked and sealed, and I have them in a safe deposit box where they say they're conscientious objectors. That's the only alternative under this current system that they have. So if you do choose to keep this system, you really should, so more of us don't have to go to jail, okay? Our jails are so full already, give us that option. But better yet, I suggest we don't need it. Your first question is this: do we need an active draft for our military? And here's something Ms. Wada can respond to. The Center for Defense Information, under the Program for Government Oversight, has estimated that the Defense Department doesn't know or isn't willing to tell us where 1 out of 10 active duty service members are now. You know, this reminds me of how the DoD handles its money, i.e., well, it's around here somewhere. Okay? Now, I will finish up by saying, with something of a warning, based on what's happened so far, is that if you do have mandatory service, it will be immensely unfair. We have a society that's polarized in wealth and power more than in the late 1920s, and wealth easily translates into power and vice versa. Anybody who wants to get out of this, who has the money, can. As mentioned, okay, is that it? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, last question.
I
In the back.
protest that you were only choosing men. You chose one woman, and that's it.
No, I had
these
1,
people.
2. I mean, I was going based on how hands were raised and going back and forth across
And
the
we
room.
all
So,
come here and have things to say.
well, ma'am, that's why we said that we're happy to take your comments. If you have written comments, we'll be happy to take them. If you want to put them via the website or on the card, we're happy to accept them.
I want to read it today.
But I was going to give the last question right here. Yes, ma'am.
All of us should have the right to speak.
Thank you. You've asked for input from the public as to whether we still need the selective service. I'm addressing number 1, a selective service process, and in a word, no. The military already has my son, who's been deployed to the Middle East 6 times to Iraq and Afghanistan, and has returned with traumatic brain injury. He lost his family. He suffers from PTSD that will never go away. The military already has the body of Sergeant Major Timothy Allen Bollier, who died on his 7th deployment just last month from an insider attack. They and thousands who returned visibly disabled from these forever wars, and the countless that will carry the invisible wounds of war. There are 6,959 that will never return. 20 were killed just this year. The suicides we know about, 20 a day. So tell me, what else do you want from us? Isn't it obvious to all of us that when wars are based on lies and go on to become what is now the longest war in U.S. history, young men and women will still enlist? Certainly after 9/11, the enlistees surged. Why are we spending all this time trying to think of ways to track down our country's most precious resource for future wars? We can't even close these wars. Please think long and hard before you start making plans to destroy another generation of innocent and patriotic men and women, and ask them to sacrifice their lives for other people's agendas. If our country is threatened and the cause is truly for defense, our people will enlist. And don't dismiss these ideas. There are thousands of us that feel just like me, military families, who are appalled at the very thought that people are making plans for the next war and how they can figure out how that's going to work and how they're going to fill this pool. We can't even take care of the veterans when they come home from these wars.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. That brings us to the conclusion of today's meeting. I'm sorry, we are out of time. We only have the room for a certain period of time. We want to thank again our panelists. We appreciate your perspective and service. Thank you to Cal State University Los Angeles for hosting us, and to all of you for taking the time to come.
My name is Kathleen Hernandez.
I would like
and I
again to
appreciate
point
your
out the fact
honesty and very
that if you'd like to
opinion
provide
in
written
regards to
testimony, we'll be happy to
selective
receive it
service
here.
registration.
Also,
The
please go to our
military
website,
driver
inspiretoserve.gov,
is not a
and provide
necessary
comments either
component
via the
of
website
US
form
national
or the
security.
cards that were on your chair. Again, thank you very much. Have a good evening, and we look forward to coming back and discussing recommendations with you at a future time.